That while Treasury is flexing its muscles, saying it's trying to recover about 1.8 billion rand of debt owed to the Auditor General. Akas Sitole, independent political analyst, joining us for that conversation. Then Pakistau recently scrapping the proposed credit reforms that were envisioned to help small businesses gain credit on the market. Business Unity South Africa not too happy about that. We'll have a special panel here on The Money Show. Khulekani Mathe, CEO Designate of Business Unity South Africa, John Rudlu, the CEO of Small Business Institute, and Refilo Mokhaneng, Chief Executive of the Black Entrepreneurs Alliance, joining us for that conversation. Later, how I make my money. Tonight we talk to Mandla Sbego, the owner of F&B Art Joburg. All that and more on The Money Show. But for now, your news with Dominique Majola.
Good evening, I'm Maki Malapo. The Correctional Supervision and Parole Board has recommended that Donovan Moody, convicted killer of university student Lee Matthews, be released on parole. The board held a hearing today at the Luco prison where Moody is serving a life sentence. Moody pleaded guilty to Matthews' abduction and murder in 2004 when she was 21. Her father, Rob, has questioned how the board came to its decision to consider paroling the convict.
There's a problem that we have with that recommendation, because we understand that all they considered was a 1.5 year profile while he was in Luco prison. What has been ignored are the other 19 years or 18.5 years when he was incarcerated in Johannesburg prison.
The Special Investigating Unit has been given the green light to broaden its probe into allegations of serious maladministration in the Water and Sanitation Department. This after President Cyril Ramaphosa signed a proclamation expanding the SIU's probe into the War on Leaks program to include the Drop the Block project. The investigation was initially limited to the Water and Sanitation Department and Sidibeng Water, but will now also include water utility Lepelle Northern Water. Nokayam Tambo has more.
The War on Leaks program was launched by then-President Jacob Zuma in 2015 to train at least 15,000 young people to reduce water losses through leaks. Nomvula Mokonyane was Water and Sanitation Minister at the time. When the SIU launched the investigation, it had raised concerns about inflated costs, the irregular appointment of service providers and other irregular expenditure. To further reduce water consumption, the Department of Water and Sanitation launched its Drop the Block campaign in 2018. The implementation of both initiatives is under scrutiny. SIU spokesperson Keza Khanyach.
The amendment also amends the time frame of the investigation, which will now start from the 1st January 2015 and end on the 12th of September 2025.
Khanyaho says the investigation includes suppliers or service providers appointed by the department and the water utilities. Nogukanyam Dambo, Eyewitness News.
The African Transformation Movement says it will legally challenge a decision by a police disciplinary committee to overturn the misconduct findings of the public protector against the head of the Presidential Protection Service, Major General Wally Rhoda. The ATM's parliamentary leader, Vuyo Zungula, who lodged the complaint over the way in which Rhoda is said to have conducted a rogue investigation into the president's missing Parapara millions, says the public protector's recommendations can't be ignored for political expediency. This follows a response from Acting Police Minister Feroz Kochalia to a parliamentary question from Zungula that Rhoda has been found not guilty of breaching the SAPS disciplinary code. Today, suspects in the Palapala matter appeared in court for the start of their trial. Lindsay Dentlinger has more.
While the ATM awaits its day in court to challenge the Public Protector's 2023 report on the Palapala matter that cleared the president of any wrongdoing, MP Vuyo Zungula says it will now also question the SAPS overturning the findings made in that report against the president's main bodyguard, Wally Rhoda. Rhoda was found to have initiated his own investigation into the theft of the US dollars that included a trip to Namibia to interrogate suspects after the president reported the matter to him. Zungula says his party will continue to push for the release of the classified police report that has cleared Rhoda.
So it can't be that the public protector has got a certain finding. However, IPID becomes creative and says a disciplinary hearing was conducted. However, no discipline.
The Constitutional Court has previously ruled that the Public Protector's remedial action is binding. Lindsay Dentlinger, Eyewitness News.
The South African Communist Party in the Western Cape has labelled the DA government's decision to dissolve the Knysna municipality as a political witch hunt. The DA-led government has decided to put the municipality under administration due to service delivery failures. Earlier this year, local government MEC Anton Bredell cited, among other issues, governance failures, an organisational culture of fear and political interference in the administration. An administrator will take over the running of the Garden Route town until fresh elections are held within 90 days. Ntutuzelo Nene has more.
The Knysna municipality, governed by a coalition of the ANC, the Patriotic Alliance, and the Plaslike Besorgte and Warners, has made headlines for failing to provide services to its people. It's also faced allegations of corruption and political instability. However, the ANC's tripartite alliance partner, the SACP, suggests that the situation has improved over the past 12 months. The Communist Party says the DA's intervention is unjustified and politically opportunistic. The party adds that the decision is not motivated by genuine concerns for service delivery, but by the DA's refusal to accept the outcomes of democratic elections in Knysna. Tutuzelo Nene, Eyewitness News.
And in Spain, the US has today announced that it has reached a framework deal with China to resolve their dispute over TikTok, paving the way for the Chinese-owned app to pass to US-controlled ownership. Earlier this year, Congress passed a law that required the social media platform's parent company, ByteDance, to sell its business or face being shut down in America. A delegation of officials from both countries held a second day of trade talks in Madrid today as the Wednesday deadline looms for the Chinese owner of TikTok to find a buyer for its American operations. After initially calling for TikTok to be banned during his first term, President Donald Trump has gone on to postpone the deadline 3 times so far, the latest due to expire on Wednesday. America's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent says Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping will complete the deal on Friday. However, China has not commented. Gold's trading at $3,667.17 an ounce. The rand's at 17.36 to the dollar, at 23.61 to the pound, at 20.42 to the euro. Brent crude oil's at $67.43 a barrel.
In your sport, Adeslam Madu believes that his MTN8 success is a win for African coaches. The Springboks sent warning shots ahead of Puma's tests in the Rugby Championship, and Armand Duplantis sets 14th pole vault world record.
A look at your weather. Clear skies in store for Gauteng. Tomorrow, Joburg will drop to overnight lows of 12 degrees and peak at highs of 29. Pretoria is at 14 and 33. Vereeniging is at 9 and 28 degrees. Partly cloudy skies for the mother city tomorrow, along with light rain and moderate southwesterly winds at a low of 13 and a high of 15 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News this hour. The Correctional Supervision and Parole Board has recommended that Donovan Moody, convicted killer of university student Lee Matthews, be released on parole.
EWN, in touch, in tune and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app. EWN Traffic.
If you are leaving Pasonia heading towards Soweto, there's an accident scene on the N12 westbound near the Deep Kloof interchange, causing more than a 20-minute delay all the way from Xavier. Also, slow-moving traffic still driving through the Joburg CBD. That's on the M1 southbound between Killarney Bends and the Crown interchange. Boksburg roadwork still slowing down traffic. N17 in both directions approaching Rondapole Road, while in the mother city there's heavy delays. M5 southbound. This is between Berkeley and Kenilworth. Also, some delays. N2 outbound between Mowbray Main and Bunga Avenue. If you come across any other traffic issues, please WhatsApp us on 072 702 1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
And now, The Money Show with Moteo Paripe
On 702. Let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply. Good evening, and welcome to the Money Show. I hope you've had a great Monday so far. My name is Mateo Juaripe in for Stephen Grootes for the rest of the week. Tonight on The Money Show, a few issues to tackle. Very, very interesting conversation. We'll be starting with the Parks Tau issue. Of course, he and the department scrapping the proposed credit reforms that were envisioned to help small businesses gain business credit on the market. Business Unity South Africa says this is a missed opportunity for the department. Khulekani Mathe, CEO designate of Business Unity South Africa, will join us for that conversation. John Lulu, the CEO at Small Business Institute, and Refilo Monageng, Chief Executive of the Black Entrepreneurs Alliance, are joining us for that conversation. Some 20,000 submissions are saying that the particular reform on small business credit should be reversed, and it was by the department last week, but we'll give you more insights on that issue later. A market commentary coming from Arthur Karras, Old Mutual Investment Group, joining us to break down the markets. A last resurgence session for the JSE, ending the day in positive territory today. We'll tell you about the exact numbers that played out on the market. Then later on, a very, very concerning issue, especially with the closure of a tire manufacturer here in the country early this year. SA manufacturers rather saying that they're seeing a lot of dumping imports, especially coming through from China, and that could possibly raise the price of tires by 41%. Duduzo Khala, managing executive at the South African Tire Manufacturers Conference, joins us a bit later for that conversation. And then we'll have our business book review, reading the Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a Port City by Tanya Zak. Hilary Joffe, the editor-at-large at Business Day, will break down that book for us. And then How I Make My Money after 7:30. Mandla Sbego, the owner of FNB Art Joburg, joins us for that conversation. So let's talk money.
The Money Show
with Motheo Paripe
on 702. Let's walk the talk.
This is an issue that has played itself out in Parliament, in the media, but one that has gotten a big response from the public. Now, the Department of Trade and Industry and Competition has been left with egg on its face after it recently gazetted for public comment several draft amendments to the National Credit Act of 2005. Now, under the proposed rules, institutions of higher education would have been allowed to report unpaid tuition and fee arrears to credit bureaus. Now, the department received an avalanche of responses from the public, more than 20,000, with many concerned the new rules would have effectively blacklisted students, saddling them with negative credit histories before they even graduated. Now, in a country where young people are told to start businesses, where funding for starting a business is quite scarce, it would have been a major problem. But there is another argument to this particular discussion. A Business Unity South Africa said it's a missed opportunity to have abruptly scrapped the reforms. There were things that would have been discussed there that could have benefited small businesses. So we have a Money Show panel just breaking down this issue, joined tonight by Khulekani Mathe, the CEO designate of Business Unity South Africa, John Lulu, the CEO of Small Business Institute, and Refilo Monageng, the Chief Executive of the Black Entrepreneurs Alliance. Welcome to you all to the Money Show. I think I'd like to start with you then, Khulekani, around this particular issue. Critics had feared this would effectively blacklist students, saddling them with negative credit histories before they even graduated. But you're not pleased by this particular scrapping, saying it's a missed opportunity. Why?
So good evening, Motheo, and to the panelists. Thank you for the opportunity. Let's clarify a few things, Motheo. So first of all, I think we need to clarify to the public that what was picked up and objected to was actually not the substance of the amendments that were put out by the Department of Trade and Industry, right? Those provisions that deals with institutional institutions, etc., have been in those regulations since 2006. It was not new. What was introduced here in this amendment was really a very minor amendment in that section to allow banks to lend to small businesses. So in the particular section that seems to have got everybody worried, there was only the insertion of the words including juristic persons. What that means is that until now, as you know, we do not have a credit bureau for small businesses or for juristic persons, period. We've got a credit bureau that collects information on individual consumers, right? So that when I apply for credit, they have a record of how I conduct my credit and then make a decision. When it comes to SMEs, there is no such centralized repository of information that can be used by credit providers to assess, the credit worthiness of a business. So the insertion of the word simply meant that now information about about small businesses would be available, which would be an important part of extending or information necessary to extend credit to small businesses. Let me also add here that this came out of the deliberations in a work stream of the partnership with government where the president posed a questions to us as business and said, why are banks not lending more to SMEs? Now, I don't work for banks, so we took that question to the banks and said, here is a question for you. And they went and came back and said, actually, there are some provisions of the National Credit Act and the regulations which prohibit lending to certain categories of small business. And so they said one way would be to make some of those adjustments or amendments to the legislation, to the regulations to allow for that. They also said that there would be a need to amend the National Credit Act because it is now a 20-year-old piece of legislation, not entirely in line with how the credit environment has evolved. But they said at the start, these would be the adjustments that would begin to allow banks to extend credit.
But
so this was
Bulelani,
really
I just want to come in there.
with good intentions.
In terms of these particular reforms, on an individual level, if I'm leaving varsity and I've got some fees and arrears and I've now been flagged by a varsity as an individual and I want to start a business as an individual, I mean, the bank only has me to look at in terms of issuing credit. Is that where maybe the public was lost around these particular reforms?
Let us be absolutely clear. These provisions that people seem to have been concerned about have been there since 2006, right? So to the extent that they've been there, and we have not had the kind of everything that everybody seems to be raising, and I'm not saying that they're not justified, but they have not materialized in 19 years. There was a misunderstanding here to think that these are being introduced now. What was really being introduced now is a minor amendment that was really dealing with businesses as juristic persons, not as individuals. And those words were inserted to allow for that particular aspect.
Let me bring in Refilwe Monageng now, the CEO of the Black Entrepreneurs Alliance. Refilwe, looking at these particular reforms, of course, small businesses in South Africa need as much policy that points to them getting funding, getting credit, especially from private banks. Do you think that the scrapping of these reforms has set small businesses back?
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Muteo, and the listeners, and good evening to the panelists. So I'll say to you that it is setting small business back. I mean, if you look at the FinScope Micro, Small, Medium Enterprise South Africa 2024 report, it has found that there are approximately 3 million entrepreneurs, or other micro entrepreneurs in South Africa, employing around 13.4 million people. And importantly, given South Africa's high unemployment rate, particularly among the youth, you would appreciate that the FinScope data, it indicates that 30% of these owners are 35 years older or younger. Now, why am I making mention of this? It is because the South African banks are committed to supporting these type of entrepreneurs, and with that, they've advanced 274 billion as at January of 2025. Now, if this is not advanced or it's backtracked, it means less amount of money would be lended to these entrepreneurs, then impacting on them to grow their businesses, impacting on them being able to get new opportunities, for example, being able to fulfill purchase order numbers that are gotten from government and corporate companies. That's perpetuating a narrative that black businesses underperform when they are given orders.
John Lulu, Small Business Institute CEO, looking at this particular reform, it's been scrapped already. Do you think the minister should have dug in his heels and said, look, let's try and explain properly how these things are going to work? Because the 20,000 submissions, I think, came directly after the EFF in Parliament raised the issue around how this would disenfranchise those that go to school and find themselves in student debt, and how that would play out later in their lives.
So, thank you. Can I make 4 points?
Sure, go ahead.
The first one is a point I made in a book by Bruce Whitfield, who was the host of this show, Money Show. The second one that I would like to make is in your show is the fact that ministers must not change policies because there's an administration that has changed. The second one is that administrations must not make policies on the basis of the hoof.
But ministers are policy makers, John. You don't think they should be part of the process?
No, it means that ministers must make policies on the basis of evidence. There was no evidence based on this. So can I just make 2 other points? The 2 other points are what happened to the lottery. Same thing. Reversal. We must listen to the administration. Then
this includes small businesses as stakeholders. Kulagani, maybe the final word from you in terms of this. Would you like then to meet with the minister, try and rework these particular sets of reforms, because they seem to be quite important to the small business sector, but they've been shunned out already?
No, absolutely. I mean, the point that was made by the other panelist, I forget the name, is absolutely critical. This sets back the cause of advancing credit to small businesses, in turn allowing them to grow and employ more people. And this is why these amendments were introduced in the first place. So we will reach out to the minister and seek an audience with him so that we can really address this matter, because it is so critical to what we are trying to achieve. What is necessary is to explain to South Africans this was a complete misunderstanding. So we must avoid misunderstanding and letting a misunderstanding take us down a path that is unintended. And this is what we intend to raise with the minister, but also do our part in really demonstrating to the public, explaining to the public what was intended here, and that the fears that have been expressed are definitely in the context of these regulations or amendments is misplaced.
All right, thank you to Khulekani Mathe, CEO of Designate of Business Unity South Africa, John Lulu, the CEO of Small Business Institute, and Refulo Monacheng, Chief Executive of the Black Entrepreneurs Alliance. They're saying that scrap reform around small businesses and the credit that could have been issued by the market, a big mistake. There should be more discussions and maybe a relook and another explanation to the nation of how this would actually play out on the market.
The Money Show.
The markets.
Arthur Karas, a portfolio manager at Macro Solutions at Old Mutual, joining us for the markets this evening. A last resurgent effort from the JSE, especially for mining shares, making sure that the local boss ended the day in positive territory. Welcome, Arthur. A big week in terms of interest rates. I think that'll be the buzzword here in South Africa, elsewhere as well in the US, in terms of whether those cuts will be coming.
Yes, absolutely. I think what we're seeing is there's probably more chance of interest rate cuts in the US than in South Africa. I think we're probably near the end of our cycle, and I think that's partly what's driving some of the rand strength. People expecting South African interest rates to remain higher while US rates get a bit lower.
Bureau for Economic Research saying that in terms of inflation forecast, now at 4.2%, the lowest since the Bureau started their work in 2011. Does this bode well ahead of the MPC meeting, I think starting tomorrow, if not today, ahead of those interest rates announcement on Thursday?
I think the key thing to remember is that we're looking at a shift in regime. So we're looking at a change of moving interest rates target to a 3% level. So there's a lot of talk about that. I think the Reserve Bank is seeing this as an opportunity to set a lower target and move us into a lower inflation space. I think that would be very good for South Africa in the long term. But we're still trying to figure out how we're going to get there. And I think partly, I think that is weighing on what we can expect from interest rates locally.
There's been a lot of pressure on the US Fed Chair Jerome Powell, especially since the second term for Donald Trump started in the US. He wants more cuts. He's seeing the weaker jobs numbers and how the economy has faltered a little bit in the US and wants more stimulus through those cuts. Will he get them this time around?
He does. He definitely wants those cuts. He wants to stimulate the economy. Whether it's an appropriate thing to do when you still have quite a strong economy, when you still have pretty much full employment, when you have some indicators that suggest that inflation is still quite sticky there, makes it quite a tricky thing. I think the last a few bits of economic data that have come out kind of make it a bit easier for Powell to do that. But I think that political pressure is going to remain on it. It's very concerning because we do want an independent Fed. I think that's one of the cornerstones of modern financial systems, and seeing the Fed come under political pressure is a bit of a worry for everyone around the world.
A big jump for outsurance on the market, up 7%, surging as fewer South African power cuts boost profit. They reported a big jump in their business and also that more than 8% dividend for shareholders.
That was a very, very good result. I think pretty much expected. I think we did expect a strong result for them. But to give them credit, especially the South African business, quite a mature business, but still growing premiums at 10%, good cost performance, and also less weather-related, environmental-related claims. Excellent claims performance from them into really strong results, and they returned some of the capital that they got from on their business disposals. So it's pretty much on track to deliver the kind of strong performance over the next 2 years that people expect. And also it's worthwhile mentioning, if people didn't notice, that within this very good result, they're still losing over 400 million rand operating profit in their startup in Ireland. So they're able to deliver a result like this while still developing a business in another geography. So very good result.
Yeah, 236 cents is nothing to scoff at in terms of a dividend, up 36.2% compared to the prior year. Do you expect any volatility for the rand, given the topics we've talked about, the US Fed interest rates, but also the SARB actually expected to announce interest rates this week? A bit of tough movement, or do you still expect it to be as strong as it has been over the 2025 year?
So there's usually two things, or the movements in the rand usually come from two different directions. The one is local, so we might have something happen locally that makes overseas investors happy or unhappy, and the other one is global. So the rand always gets priced off its relationship to the US dollar. So if the dollar might get weaker, and with nothing else happening in South Africa, the rand can get stronger. And I think at the moment we're delivering reasonable inflation results, but very weak growth. I think so. The main thing that's driving our currency at the moment is probably the weaker dollar rather than anything else.
All right, that's Arthur Karas, portfolio manager at Macro Solutions at Old Mutual Investment. Just breaking down the markets for us. Big week for interest rates. Time now is 6:30. Your news with Dominique Machola.
Thanks, Mateo, and good evening. The Higher Education Department, NSFAS, and institutions of higher learning will form a new collective to deal with student matters in 2026. The group includes student leaders who will meet weekly and reflect on solutions that have been implemented to date. Higher Education Minister Budima Namela announced the formation of the group at a media briefing in Pretoria today, addressing readiness for the 2026 academic year. He says he wants the group to anticipate challenges timelessly to prevent protest action.
Yes, students have the right to strike. University leaders have the right to protect campus property. But we must establish proper conflict resolution structures on campus before we even get the police or the department.
Experts have raised concerns about the political struggles for power, which they say has created factional rift between the structures for criminal justice system amid claims of maladministration across the board. This as the Commission of Inquiry into Alleged Criminality, Political Interference and Corruption in the Criminal Justice System prepares to begin its work this week. But questions of political allegiance fueling factionalism continues to drive conversations in the KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's explosive allegations in July. Oren Singh reports.
Crime expert Chad Thomas says factionalism within SAPS dates back 25 years to the very first political appointment of Jackie Salebi as National Police Commissioner, who had no previous policing experience.
Since then, we've seen political interference, which of course has created factionalism. The factionalism has created a fractured leadership, and that fractured leadership has now left us with a deficit in leadership.
Political analyst Kenneth Mogatle believes evidence presented at the Madlanga Commission will hurt the former governing party, the ANC.
These divisions is a true reflection of multiple factions which are existing in the ANC today.
KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi will testify as the first witness at the Madlanga Commission on Wednesday. Arun Singh, Eyewitness News.
Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis says national government intends using Cape Town as the blueprint for the future of expanded public works program. Hill-Lewis hosted the EPWP listing tour along with Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Dean McPherson in Duffelsig Mitchell's Plain today. The Cape Town leg is part of a nationwide tour for government to engage with communities about their experiences with the program. Carlo Peterson has more.
Cape Town Mayor Jordan Hill-Lewis says more than 40,000 work opportunities were created via the EPWP in Cape Town in the last financial year. Hill-Lewis says more than 1,000 EPWP workers have become permanent City of Cape Town employees.
That really shows that it's not just, yes, of course, most of it is it's likely to always be a temporary work opportunity program, but a large portion of those are actually getting skills that they need to get into full-time employment.
Hill-Lewis says Public Works and Infrastructure Minister Dean McPherson intends using the city's implementation of the EPWP to reimagine the program. Carlo Peterson, Eyewitness News, in Tafelberg, Mitchell's Plain.
The National Consumer Commission has recalled some of Revlon's Mitchum roll-on products due to safety concerns. In a statement released today, the Commission says it was informed by the company that recent change in the manufacturing process of a raw material has affected the acidity levels, which may cause an irritation to the skin. About 124,000 units, which were distributed since April, have been identified as the affected batches. NCC spokesperson Petun Taba has urged consumers to return the products to their nearest retailers.
Revlon South Africa informed the Commission that they are recalling Mitchum Women Roll-On 100 ml Shower Fresh, Powder Fresh, as well as Mitchum Men Roll-On 100 ml 48 Sports, as well as 48-hour Mountain Air. These roll-ons were made available in South Africa since April this year.
A fine Tuesday in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Temperatures will drop to overnight lows of between 9 and 14 degrees and peak of highs of between 28 and 33 degrees. Partly cloudy skies for Cape Town with light rain and moderate southwesterly winds at a low of 13 and a high of 15 degrees. Your top story in EWN this hour. The Higher Education Department, NSFAS, and institutions of higher learning will form a new collective to deal with student matters in 2026.
EWN Traffic.
Heading into Soweto, there's an accident scene on the N12 westbound near the Deep Kloof interchange, causing delays from Xavier Road. Also traveling towards Brakpan, there's roadworks causing some delays in Sunwood Park, Boksburg. That's on the N12, or rather N17 eastbound, approaching Rondebolt Road in the mother city. There's delays on Nelson Mandela Boulevard outbound, approaching Rondeboom. There's also slow-moving traffic on the M3 South. This is between Rhodes Avenue and Claremont, and bumper-to-bumper traffic N2 outbound between Mowbray Main and Bunga Avenue. If you come across any other traffic issues, please WhatsApp us on 072-702-1702.
There's more EWN on air, online, and on the EWN app.
Beyond every boardroom is a story waiting to be written. A story of a business and its potential, of a community that thrives, a hospital that serves, and energy that powers millions of dreams. It's a story that only gets better with a partner that has the expertise and solutions to make it a reality. At ABSA CIB, we are invested in your story, and we invite you to write it with us, because your story matters. ABSA, an authorized FSP and registered credit provider.
Your workday calls for more performance, more doing the impossible, more challenge accepted. Your weekends demand more excitement, more detours, more limitless living. And the new GWM P300 LS is where it all comes together. Bring it on in the new P300 LS with a 2.4 turbo diesel and 12.3-inch touchscreen from only $5,999 per month. Visit gwm.co.za for T's and C's and to book a test drive. GWM, go with more. Brought to you by GWM Finance, a division of Westbank, an authorized financial services and registered credit provider.
Spar brings you super savings. Get 750 gram, 780 gram, 850 gram Nola mayonnaise, excluding squeeze bottle, for $38.99. Save R6 with Spar Rewards, or 2-liter Spar full cream or low-fat ultra-pasteurized milk for $32.99 with Spar Rewards. Plus, you could win your share of 6 million rand in instant cash. Price is valid until 22 September 2025. While stocks last. T's and C's apply.
And K-Talk. Motel is on The Money Show.
Welcome back to The Money Show. Now, before we went to news, we're talking about those results that came through from OUTsurance. They're up 7% on the JSE after reporting a strong dividend for their shareholders of 237 cents. We have a rather interesting question from one of our listeners.
Good evening, Mateo. Hope you guys are well, and hello 702 Land. Just a quick question on the OUTsurance update. So they are seeing less claims coming from weather-related instances, and they're also claiming they're getting a 10% increase on premiums. With the reduced risk, do we see a reduction in the premiums, or is it just a one-way ticket? Thank you. Bye.
It's a one-way ticket to premium surging. I've never heard of an insurer saying they're going to lessen your risk unless you discuss with them, as one of their clients, as clients to insurer. But I've never heard them having a blanket downward drive for their premiums. So even though they're seeing less risk, those premiums will still be quite high.
EWN Sport.
Tolakele Mganga keeping score. Very painful or successful weekend, depending which team you are a fan of. I'm a Man United fan, so you know how that went for me. If you're a New Zealander, we know how that went for you. But what's sport like on this Monday?
Well, Moteo, if you're a Pirates fan, Adeslam Moody believes an undermining of African coaches was behind the critics thinking he wouldn't perform well at the club. He won his first trophy since his appointment in June as he led the Buccaneers to a fourth MTNA triumph in a row following a 3-0 extra time win over Stellenbosch.
I still have to work hard, very hard, every morning, every day, just to show to the people that I am able to coach such big club in Africa, to give the confidence to African competences. And today we won the cup with all African competences in my staff.
Miguel Cardoso is confident that Themba Zwane only suffered a minor injury in Mamelodi Sundowns' 3-0 win over Makesi in the Betway Premiership. His comments come amid concerns around Zwane's AFCON availability. That's after the midfielder was forced off with a muscle problem just minutes after coming on.
Our intention was to bring him on the match. We could give him game time so that he gradually progresses on the integration on the team. As I said, I was very, very clear on the relation we had together, but accidents happen, even if once they try to drive safe, but when we play football, you never know what can happen. Unfortunately, there's a small thing. Let's hope that we can recover him as quick as possible so that he looks forward for what he has ahead.
Ruben Amorim insists he won't change his philosophy despite United's 3-0 mauling at the hands of City in yesterday's Manchester derby. And Erling Haaland double condemned the Red Devils to defeat as goalkeeper Gianluigi Donnarumma also kept a clean sheet on debut.
The fans don't want to hear me saying these things, and I know that they are not going to listen nothing and going to be upset. With that, I cannot do nothing. I'm trying to be rational, and I don't lie to myself. So I see the record, I understand the frustration of everybody, and I understand any decision that came with that.
And Apelele Fassi is the big injury concern for the Springboks ahead of their rugby championship games against Argentina. He was replaced towards the end of the first half of the 43-10 win over New Zealand and was seen wearing a moon boot as he watched the rest of the campaign from the sidelines. At the same time, Cheston Colby has discussed the challenge the defending champions will face against the Pumas.
They've been playing really well. In the rugby championship, it's always a physical battle against them. But yeah, we just need to make sure that we focus on ourselves and where we can be better and just be clinical. I think this rugby is all about being clinical, disciplined, and just playing on the right side of the field.
Tolagele Mganga, Eyewitness News Sport.
Feeling some lag in Sector 3?
Copy. Optimizing working capital. Ready. You're approaching a tight corner. Cash flow pressure ahead.
Low on liquidity. Supply pressure is building. Set.
Deploying cash injection in 3, 2, 1. Flow.
Nice move. Better supply chain control.
Lab time advantage. Faster cash cycles, leaner inventory, and optimized working capital.
Ready, set, cash flow. Corporate banking from RMB. RMB, a division of First Rand Bank Limited, an authorized FSP and credit provider.
When captains of industry gather to discover how AI and other exponential technologies can future-proof their organizations, they'll find out what matters most at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. Global thought leader Dr. Vivian Ming will challenge you on what it means to lead in an automated world by unlocking the full potential of human intelligence in the age of AI. Join her and other thought leaders by visiting sbinstitute.co.za to book your seat at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. It will be on the 2nd of October at the Forum in Bryanston. Stellenbosch Business Institute, beyond a business school.
What do partners of the Gates Foundation do when facing the world's toughest challenges? They keep going. From discovering a plastic drape that helps detect excessive postpartum bleeding faster, to developing better bed nets to kill malaria-carrying mosquitoes, to researching an RSV vaccine that could save hundreds of thousands of children. For every problem, there are people who prove that progress is possible. The Gates Foundation, partners of human potential. Learn more at gatesfoundation.org/keep going.
702 and Cape Talk.
Moteo is on X
At Moteo_Khwaripe.
One question for you. Do you buy your tires locally? The total demand for tire sales in South Africa is 12 million units per year. But South African manufacturers are saying they're seeing less and less of that. In fact, the dumping in terms of imports, especially from Asian producers, is likely to raise prices by 41%. The tire manufacturing industry in South Africa flagging that those particular imports making trade, making business difficult, but also could hurt consumers in the pockets. Nduduzo Kala, managing executive at the South African Tire Manufacturers Conference, joins us for this particular discussion. Nduduzo, this particular year has not been a great one for tire manufacturers in the country. We've seen a closure of a plant in the Eastern Cape, but now the bleeding hasn't stopped, given that those dump imports are still coming in. Just how bad is the problem?
Mateo, greetings or good evening to yourself and to the viewers, and thank you for having myself and the SATMC on your show today. I think the situation is quite dire in the sense that I think to your point, we have lost a long-standing brand in the country and which is globally recognized. And I think that accounted for direct jobs of about 900 direct employment in the industry. And I think you can only think of what that translates to from an indirect jobs perspective to say there will be an aftermath or after effect of that 900 jobs. But certainly to your point is to say I think the result of that is because of the unfair trade that we have seen in the replacement of domestic market in South Africa because of cheap or unfair trading practices that we have seen, one from China and other Asian markets such as Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam.
And what exactly are those unfair trading practices? Are there more favorable rates for them to bring their tires over here in South Africa? Do they bring them here without any scrutiny from local authorities? What is the unfair treatment?
So maybe let me contextualize it better in the sense that one, we have, or if I still account for, let's say, the Goodyear or the plant that we lost this year, we had 4 local tire manufacturers. And to your earlier point of saying there are 12 million units that are traded or sold in the domestic market per year. The South African local manufacturers, before, this is 2016, we used to have a market share of greater than 60% of that 12 odd million tires that are sold in the industry. As at last year, 2024, that reduced significantly to under 40%. I think the number was 39%. So let's round it up to 40%. That means that of the 12 million tires that are sold, the local tire producers only account for just under 5 million tires of those sales. And the investment that these companies have made in the country for capacity of how much they can ultimately produce is 9.8 million tires. So that means that there's a gap in what investment we've made versus what ultimately gets sold. And the result of that is because of unfair trade is the fact that they bring in the tires, and it's what we term dumping in economic terms, to say the landed price is far less than what we produce it at cost.
It's a major undercutting.
It's major undercutting, which then makes us completely uncompetitive in the market as local producers, and that is because of structural challenges that I think we've had. So to correct that, we've then made applications to ITAC and the DTIC to correct that. First, we had, I think, the approval in July 2023, particularly to China, or tires coming in from China. And we saw an approval of or imposition of duties between 7 to about 43 odd %. And subsequently, what we've seen after that is that the shift in the market shares, and also I think the likelihood of what is going to continue if there are no structural changes that take place, was to say they were circumventing and bringing in tires and not paying in the dumping duties in the window after the July 2023. So they were circumventing, and there were particular factories that we then said, actually, there's problems here, which we highlighted to SARS, ITAC, and the DTIC. And the second problem that created was that they then shifted production from China, which had the imposition of duties, to then 3 other markets, also Asian-based, being Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. So that means that after the imposition, they then switched production to these economies, and we saw then an influx of products coming into these countries. And we then also created or raised a flag with ITAC to say there are other problems here which are not protecting the local producers. And hence, I think we then filed for a country hopping application, which has seen 5% to about 42% on Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam. However, we still feel that those are not enough, and we need, I think, much more protection so that we can still sustain the local producers.
In terms of the sale of these tires, the one that come in cheap through the dumping process, as you say, is it also a matter of consumers going through high cost of living environment in South Africa. We've seen what happened in the car sales industry, where a lot of more households are opting for Asian brands because they come in a little bit more affordable. Is it the same with the tires? Do people go to stores to change their tires and find out, well, there's 4 pairs of tires there that could come in at 1,000, 2,000 less?
I mean, I think that's precisely one of the reasons. And I think why does that happen, I think, is the questions, or what causes that to happen is the questions that I think we need to ask ourselves as consumers, and also to then say, what are the repercussions of that? One, I think, let's say other markets are far more technologically advanced than, let's say, South Africa, and are able to reorganize themselves far quicker than, let's say, in a South African context. And what you then find is that the government, particularly I think in this case the Republic of China, then over-subsidizes the producers in their country and are able then to have much more economies of scale.
So their production costs will come in lower because
then be
they
far
are
lower
subsidized.
than us. And then one that then makes us to be out in terms of competitiveness. And then when you go to the shop as a consumer, a tire is never a product or a purchase that you plan for. If we are honest, it's always a gradual.
Catches you when you just don't. Your budget's not right. Funny enough, tires
when
always
your
catch
budget is not right, and then the tire just has a problem, and then now you need to make a decision on purchasing a new tire, and that's 9 out of 10 the case of what happened. It's a grudge purchase. And to your point, to say disposable income at the moment, because of high interest rates and high inflation in the country, consumers then opt for cheaper or more affordable type of solutions. And it's not just on the Asian type of products that they then opt for. They also opt for second-hand tires, or which they find on the side of the road. And both of these products, I think, one, we are starting to see some challenges of quality issues that are coming into the country of the products, to say they are not to the same level of what we have as premium brands, which is Bridgestone, which is Continental, and Dunlop. They don't have the same level of quality standards, and the cheap second-hand tires that they buy on the side of the road for 150 odd rand compared to a new tire is, I think, a feeling of saying I need to get from point A to B
and just get to the end of the month. But in terms, Nduduzo, on the last point then, what would make the tires hit the road then for these South African manufacturers of tires? Would it be perhaps a capping on the amount of tires that can come into the country, further higher duties? How would you be protected as an industry?
I think, Matteo, I think that the issue is not to say we don't want tires coming into the country. We will never also, as local producers, make the full complement or basket of tires that are required for the market. So certainly tires can be imported. I think the challenge is to say how they coming into the country and how they are traded needs to be fair. And that's the part which then touches on ITAC DTIC, who are the creators of that environment for the local producers. One, I think, to the point we were speaking on earlier, to say where dumping duties imposed in these markets. One, I think, for us to be better off, one, they need to close and fast-track those outcomes. We don't have 24 months or more to wait for outcomes that will protect the industry. The punitive measures or the dumping duties that get imposed on these economies need to then also be more punitive, to say we can't wait for a 5% punitive measure because it doesn't change the dynamics of the market. Those need to be far higher than where we've seen them previously. And lastly, I think in the previous one was the complexity of how they were implementing this. And for us and our position as SATMC is to say they need to not go as far as factories, but limit the punitive measures or dumping duties to an economy, so that I think the market can see the traction of the protectionist or the protection and the fair trade in the market far quicker.
Duduzo,
It's been more
unfortunately,
than
we've
18 months.
run out of time. And Duduzo Kala, managing executive at the South African Tire Manufacturers Conference, just breaking down how tough the industry has become for local tire manufacturers because of the cheap imports that keep coming into the country, especially from Asia. They flagging those particular imports, saying they could raise the price of tires in the country by 41%. Thank you so much for your time.
One festival, endless flavor, and 2 unforgettable days of timeless music. The DSTV Delicious International Food and Music Festival, powered by Lotto Star, returns on 20 and 21 September at Kyalami Grand Prix Circuit. On Saturday, the stage erupts with Don Toliver, Questa, and Nkabi Zezwe. Then on Sunday, experience the legendary Lauryn Hill, Wyclef Jean, Lyra, and more. The DSTV Delicious Festival, powered by Lotto Star. Tickets at Ticketmaster.
When captains of industry gather to discover how AI and other exponential technologies can future-proof their organizations, they'll find out what matters most at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. Global thought leader Dr. Vivian Ming will challenge you on what it means to lead in an automated world by unlocking the full potential of human intelligence in the age of AI. Join her and other thought leaders by visiting spinstitute.co.za to book your seat at the Stellenbosch Business Institute C-Leader Summit. It will be on the 2nd of October at the Forum in Bryanston. Stellenbosch Business Institute, beyond a business school.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show with Motheo Khwaribe
on 702.
702.
Here's another interesting story. The Auditor General in the country is trying to recover 1.8 billion rand of debt. It's owed by the country's state-owned enterprises. It's owned by municipalities in the country. But it seems these bodies, like the Auditor General, don't have much teeth when it comes to trying to recoup some of this money. But Treasury, South African Treasury, coming through to say we'll give you some of the muscle that you'll need to recoup some of this money, joined by Kaya Setola, now independent analyst. Are the teeth going to be enough, Kaya, in terms of the South African Treasury? Because we've heard of state-owned entities owing, the Auditor General, but that money not really being recouped over the years. Is the Treasury stepping in a big moment where we will find that a lot of these, state-owned enterprises and offices will pay back the money?
Good evening and good evening to the listeners. Well, it's 10 years too late, isn't it? So the big problem here is that you can split the debt that is owned to the Auditor General into 2 categories. There is the debt that is owned by what are currently operational entities and municipalities. And then there is the debt that is owed by companies that are in such dire straits. Trust me, the Auditor General is not at the top of their priority list of payments to be done. And those are the entities that are either in business rescue or in some form of liquidation. And of course, there's an entire list of those. But in relation to those that are indeed in a position to still pay some amounts, the problem seems to have been that across government at large, the question of prioritizing who to pay rests at the discretion of those that control the bank account at any particular point in time. So when they then decide that they're not going to pay the audit fee for this year, there is little that the Auditor General can do, with the specific proviso that the Auditor General cannot boycott those institutions and say, I'm not coming to audit you next year, because it will simply create a backlog that she'll ultimately have to solve. So that's where you see the accumulation of fees. That's where you see the work being done, even though people owe for previous years. So what National Treasury will now be able to do is to say, look, if you don't pay the Auditor General, we're simply not going to give you what is due to you. It is a model that they've always been reluctant to apply, simply because it is a politically sensitive issue where National Treasury can say we're not sending money to that particular municipality, and then have the politicians at the grassroots have to deal with the fallout from that. So the ANC as a party was always reluctant to do that, but it has indeed reached a stage where they can no longer avoid and kick this can down the line.
But that's definitely better than a strongly worded email telling you that you won't get the share of the budget that should be allocated to you because you are in arrears. Will definitely get people acting.
Well, the problem with South Africa is that we give autonomy to absolutely everyone that demands it. So even those that are working at these entities or these municipal structures believe that once a share has been allocated to them from the national fiscus, only they have the authority to decide how it should be distributed and how it should be allocated. So that means that the prioritization is only their decision. It's only when National Treasury says, actually, you don't seem to have mastered this, we'll do it on your behalf. That's when they get pushed into action.
All right, that was Kaya Setola talking to us about the Treasury enforcing powers to recover 1.8 billion rand in debt owed to the Auditor General's office, mainly by South Africa's SOEs and municipalities. SA Post Office owing around 63 million, Denel owing around 82 million, with the likes of Mango Airlines also owing 2 million. So there's more bites, more teeth from the National Treasury, invoking Section 216 of the Constitution, which authorizes the withholding of funds from organs of state that breach financial management legislation.
This is EWN.
Good evening, I'm Dominic Machola. The National Student Financial Aid Scheme is currently consulting communities and the private sector to create an improved accommodation framework. This is set to determine whether accommodation funds disbursed by NSFAS go to students or their respective facilities. Higher Education Minister Moody outlined the efforts during a briefing in Pretoria today, focusing on the state of readiness for the 2026 academic year. Jabulile Mbata has more.
Last month, the National Student Financial Aid Scheme assured it would conclude the accommodation framework by October 2025. Earlier, the Private Student Housing Association rejected the scheme's current policy, which pays funds directly to students, complaining that they can't be trusted to use funds accordingly. Higher Education Minister Moody says the scheme will settle on a framework to ensure that students are not homeless.
Too many learners still live in unsafe and undignified conditions. We're working with institutions, but also with communities and the private sector to accelerate accredited accommodation.
He added that this seeks to resolve delays in funding disbursements and the issue of unpaid landlords. Jabulile Mbata, Eyewitness News.
The South African Communist Party in the Western Cape has labelled the DA government's decision to dissolve the Knysna municipality as a political witch hunt. The DA-led government has decided to put the municipality under administration due to service delivery failures. Earlier this year, local government MEC Anton Bredal cited, among other issues, governance failures, an organizational culture of fear, and political interference in the administration. An administrator will take over the running of the Garden Route town until fresh elections are held within 90 days. Ntutuzelo Nene has more.
The Knysna municipality, governed by a coalition of the ANC, the Patriotic Alliance, and the Plaaslijke Besorgde and Warners, has made headlines for failing to provide services to its people. It's also faced allegations of corruption and political instability. However, the ANC's tripartite alliance partner, the SACP, suggests that the situation has improved over the past 12 months. The Communist Party says the DA's intervention is unjustified and politically opportunistic. The party adds that the decision is not motivated by genuine concerns for service delivery, but by the DA's refusal to accept the outcomes of democratic elections in Knysna. Tutuzelo Nene, Eyewitness News.
The ANC has told its councillors to do the basics correctly to avoid hostility from the communities they serve. This includes fixing potholes, making sure the street lights are on, and being available to communities always. Today, the party hosted more than 4,000 of its councillors from across the country at the FNB Stadium in Soweto. Thabiso Koba was there.
The ANC's national leadership has communicated 6 key pillars for all its councillors. They mainly deal with communicating with their communities good and bad outcomes, but also ensuring they form parts of a capable and ethical government. ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa says local government is all about getting the small things right.
Comrades, the street lighting is a simple thing.
It must happen. It's a function that we are capable of ensuring that it is executed. We are talking about simple things, and that is why the call to action is a doable one.
The ANC says it will be running 3-month reviews on all its councillors to track their individual progress in implementing the action plans. Thabiso Koba, Eyewitness News, Soweto.
And Lesotho is sending a high-level delegation to the White House in efforts to try renegotiate for lower trade duties. In August, the U.S. introduced a 15% levy for the mountainous kingdom, much lower than the initial 50% that Donald Trump threatened in April. Despite the tariff reduction, exports in the country have taken a dent to their businesses as the U.S. is Lesotho's second biggest trader for the textile exports, supplying America's retailers like Walmart. The textile sector employs at least 12,000 people and indirectly supports 40,000 jobs, but the tariff hike has led to job cuts as operational costs rise and orders dry up. U.S. goods and service trade with Lesotho totaled to estimated $276 million in 2024, up 4.6% from 2023. Maseru's trade ministry says it wants negotiations to start at zero as a starting point to be below 15%. Initially reinstating the lower tariff policy under the Growth and Opportunity AGOA. Gold is trading at $3,653.31 an ounce. The rand is at 17.35 to the dollar, 23.61 to the pound, 20.40 to the euro. Brent crude oil is at $66.99 a barrel.
Leaving the Pretoria CBD, bumper-to-bumper traffic in Hermanstad on Eskiam Pahlele between Van der Hof and Paul Kruger, while in the mother city, slow-moving traffic M5. This is between Berkeley and Kenilworth. Also, traffic is congested on the N2 outbound between Mowbray Main and Bunga Avenue.
A fine Tuesday in store for Gauteng. Tomorrow, Johannesburg will drop to overnight lows of 12 degrees and peak at highs of 29. Pretoria 14 and 33, Vereeniging 9 and 28. A partly cloudy skies for Cape Town with light rain and moderate southwesterly winds at a high of 15 degrees and low of 13. Your top story in EWN this hour: the National Student Financial Aid Scheme is currently consulting communities and the private sector to create an improved accommodation framework.
EWN, in touch, in tune, and independent. For the latest, visit ewn.co.za or download the EWN app.
And now, The Money Show with Motheo Paripe.
On 702, let's walk the talk.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply. Now, South Africa is projected to spend over 426 billion rand on debt servicing in the 2025-2026 financial year, which amounts to approximately 1.2 billion rand per day paying debt. This cost represents a significant portion of government expenditure, with Finance Minister Inoko Dongwana stating it is the largest single expenditure item in the national budget. Now, Moody's has also flagged this as a problem for South Africa. The ratings agency are warning that South Africa's fiscal strains and structural weaknesses are keeping borrowing costs elevated compared with their global peers. The report found that despite having one of the most advanced capital markets in sub-Saharan Africa, South Africa pays more to borrow than many major emerging economies. Let's chat now to Dr. Azar Jamin about this particular problem for South Africa. This has also been a discussion at the B20 in terms of the repayments of these major loans that emerging economies on the continent take. But some of these are just structural problems that are hurting ourselves. It's almost an own goal.
Without a doubt, the own goal in this situation is that there is far too much government interference in the way the economy is run. And this is, and all the regulations that are in place are actually stifling economic growth. And the most classic one now is this morning in the Business Day is headline news about how the Minister of Trade and Industry has withdrawn a bill that was aimed at enabling small businesses to receive credit more easily. I mean, one of the big structural weaknesses of the South African economy compared with other emerging markets is that there is just not enough small business that can absorb so many of the unemployed people and keep the lion's share of the population quite happy, doing their own thing, managing to eke out a living in a constructive way. And South Africa's government is making life extremely difficult for those people. Instead, the economy is dominated by the government, state-owned enterprises, powerful trade unions, and powerful big businesses. And the small man just doesn't get a look in. And this is inhibiting economic growth. And with economic growth so much lower than in other emerging markets, our tax revenues are just not growing fast enough. And yet we have all this welfare spending and other similar baggage to contend with because of high unemployment and inequality. And so government is under pressure to spend more, but the economic growth rate is too low to sustain that high level of spending, because if economic growth is too low, tax revenues are too low. So it's a vicious circle, and we find ourselves stuck in this kind of situation. And we are now being penalized on international financial markets by virtue of the fact that we are not the most indebted country in the world, by far not the most indebted. But when you then lumber the long-term interest rates that the government has to pay to borrow money on top of our debt, then suddenly we become one of the most indebted countries in the world.
This credit score of South Africa that's in the red, how does it affect businesses that are running in the country and the just amount of investment that they're withholding because they themselves have to repay debts?
I mean, it just makes the cost of capital that much higher, and indirectly compels the Reserve Bank also to keep a monetary policy tight in order to keep the attraction of having high interest rates is that is the one way in which you can attract money into your country in terms of portfolio investment, to buy the bonds and to actually lend you the money. But it's not a sustainable solution. I know that once you adjust for inflation, our long-term interest rates are amongst the highest of any country in the world. At the moment, you're getting 9, 10, 11% on parking your money into South African government debt, depending on what maturity, and the inflation rate's 3.5%. That's an amazing return of between 6 and 8% that people get. And if you're a worker with a pension fund, the pension funds are doing wonderfully out of this, because they're earning a great return with very little risk, and they don't get taxed on that. So, but it's so if you're a pensioner, you benefit from this, but the vast majority of the country is penalized in terms of the government having to spend so much of its money, of its resources and tax revenues, simply paying interest on debt rather than spending on housing and education and healthcare and policing and that kind of thing that is absolutely critical. And more critical than anything is infrastructural investment at the moment to enhance service delivery, which is just not happening.
Dr. Jamin, when we say 16 Rand 39 cents of every 100 Rand in the fiscus goes to those interest payments, how does that hit households in the country?
It hits households by virtue of the fact that the government just doesn't have enough money then available to spend on these other critical areas of social needs, such as education, healthcare, and the like. It doesn't have enough money to spend on infrastructure and to give the municipalities money to spend. And also, by virtue of the fact that it is also obliged to levy very high rates of taxation on those who do earn And that's also a disincentive, and that's been a contributing factor to large-scale immigration of very skilled personnel, and which has been depriving the country of many of the skilled people needed to actually undertake this infrastructural investment spending. Obviously, corruption interferes as well and has scuppered. But setting aside the issue of corruption, this is a huge constraint. This need to pay so much of whatever government raises in taxes towards just simply paying interest on its debt is a huge constraint on economic growth and the government's ability to spend on more useful areas of the economy.
The conversations around interest payments and high interest loans coming out from the West, there's been a discussion with the G20 happening in November. Emerging economies, especially on the continent, saying they're paying these loans at a very, very high premium. Is there a way we can find, to make sure that these loans are firstly acquired at very favorable rates that are payable and rates that are well within the currency that we have, especially against the dollar?
The answer is yes, there is a solution, and that is for developed economies to be a little more magnanimous in terms of their demands and in terms of the interest payable by emerging markets, and maybe they should be a little more forgiving, especially when it comes to things like climate change, for example, where they are imposing huge requirements on developing countries to spend on reducing their carbon footprints. And these countries don't have the money available. They're forced to borrow it, and that increases their debt still further. And at the astronomical interest rates that they're forced to pay, it's absolutely stifling for their economic growth. But, many countries are managing despite that. It's South Africa that is lagging so far behind with 1% growth compared with emerging market growth rates of 4% per annum. That is the real problem, South Africa specifically. And that relates to certain internal endemic structural weaknesses, including corruption, but there are many others as well, and high crime rates and all these things that are stifling investment and restraining economic growth. Last week, everyone was highly encouraged by the uptick in our economic growth rate from 0.1 to 0.8% in the second quarter. But what was very disappointing is when you look further, more deeply into it, you suddenly see that growth is generated more by people spending money on consumer goods than on investment. And that is not we won't be able to increase our economic growth rate if we don't spend on machinery, equipment, buildings, civil engineering works, infrastructure, and that kind of thing. We're just not going to get going. And that is what I think these ratings agencies are looking towards, to see some sign that we can start uplifting that growth rate. We were hopeful that the formation of the Government of National Unity might see us entering that kind of phase, but thus far it's been very disappointing, partly because there is a huge ideological divide between those who insist that government must do everything and the private sector mustn't be allowed to contribute. And that is stifling economic activity.
The big homework here, of course, in terms of reforms and how things are changed around for the fiscus and the way South Africa operates financially, is SA Treasury. What should they be focusing on first to try and wiggle South Africa out of this, heavy quagmire?
Well, they are trying their utmost in some respects with Operation Vulindlela to attack some of the structural weaknesses. But, Treasury can only do so much if the governance situation in the country is not, unless it is improved. Treasury can't really do as much as it really should be doing, because the problem is that a lot of money is being stolen by a handful of people in connected places who are appointing lackeys to be in certain situations in decision making, and nothing ever really gets going. A lot of money is being stolen, and that makes Treasury's task that much more difficult because it is obliged to look to the taxpayer at very high tax rates to try and make up for the shortfall that exists. It is no coincidence that South Africa's economic growth rate was keeping up with the rest of the world up until about 2012, and since then we've started lagging way behind the rest of the world. Why? Because the state capture program really began in 2009, and by 2012 started really infiltrating the economy in a big way, and we've never recovered from that. It's still alive and well, and we read about it and hear about it every day in the news, and we are just not getting on top of that. Criminal syndicates left, right, and center, and corrupt politicians left, right, and center. And until we overcome that scourge, Treasury's hands are relatively tied. It's just trying to do whatever it can within the constraints in which it is operating.
And the savings pool wouldn't be South Africa's savings grace. We do have a broad investor base ranging from pension funds to insurers, but it's just not nearly enough to try and lift the economy.
You're quite right. It's a stabilizer. There's no question. You could be far more pessimistic on the other side and say, well, South Africa is heading to a collapse. It isn't collapsing. The economy is still managing. It's amazing that 1% or 0.5%, 1%, 1.5% growth that we've been achieving year after year after year is amazingly stable, but it's not enough. The point is, we're not ending up with -5 and -7% or -10% growth as some economies, real total collapses. And part of that is because we do have a underlying savings pool of pension funds and large financial institutions. But as much as that is a source of stability, it's also a source of stifling the potential for economic growth, especially small businesses that can't gain access to a lot of the credit that only seems to be going to connected individuals and large corporations.
Okay, that was Dr. Azar Jamin, Director and Chief Economist at Econometrics, talking about Moody's flagging that South Africa's debt trap is a high borrowing cost measure for the country. SA Treasury, of course, has been at pains to explain that the servicing of debt in the country is a big ball and chain for the economy and makes it quite hard to develop South Africa's emerging economy.
The Money Show.
Business Books.
It is a Monday, one of my favorite features here on The Money Show, the Business Book Review. Tonight, covering the Business Book Review, of course, is Hilary Joffe, the columnist and editor-at-large at Business Day. We're reading The Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a Port City by Tanya Zak. There's an interesting book about the hustle and bustle of Johannesburg and the real business and trade that is happening within the city's CBD. So let's welcome Hilary Joffe for this evening's Business Book Review. Welcome to The Money Show, Hilary.
Yes, thanks for having me on the show this evening.
This is a very interesting book because when you say The Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a port city, I'm thinking, wait, Johannesburg is quite far from being close to any port of any sort. So what exactly is being meant by the Johannesburg as a port city? What part of the CBD are we talking about here?
Yes, nice. First of all, we're talking about a very specific part of the city. We're talking about what some people call the Ethiopian Quarter in downtown Joburg. Tanya Zak calls it JP. If people of a certain generation, of which I'm one, you might remember the medical buildings in downtown Joburg, such as Lister Building. It's that area. All of those buildings have been repurposed, and they are a huge center of a kind of a very dense trading hub, which is the Ethiopian Quarter of Johannesburg, which Tanya calls JP. And she's making 2 points. She's an urban planner, and she's been walking the streets of downtown Joburg for absolutely years and is absolutely fascinated by the hustle and bustle, as you say, and gives this absolutely fascinating account of Johannesburg as it really is, which reads sort of like a novel with anecdotes and very, very rich color. But she's making 2 points which are really of interest for a business audience. And she came up to me. We bumped into each other in the street a while ago, and she said, "You must review my book. It's a business book." And it's a business book for two related reasons. The first is that in these few blocks of downtown Johannesburg, which are very, very dense with all these very, very overpopulated buildings, they're turning over, even when they did a survey a few years ago, $600 million a year or maybe more. They're doing huge, huge turnovers. And second of all, when Tanya and her colleagues surveyed the area a few years ago, they discovered that 70% of the shoppers, the shopping was coming from outside South Africa. In other words, this hub is serving the entire region, that Southern African region. Traders are coming in from Malawi, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Lesotho, Botswana, all over Southern Africa to buy from the merchants who ply their trade in cheap. It's all clothes, and it's all cheap Chinese clothing. But the reason that she's calling it a port city and is that it's effectively Joburg as a transshipment kind of hub, because the stuff is coming in
and the goods are moving.
And those are moving out, are spreading out to the whole continent, if you like. And all these traders, spaza shop owners are coming to buy from the Ethiopian merchants who ply their trade in this very small area of very overpopulated, overcrowded Johannesburg. And it's a very kind of buzzing and very rich ecosystem, if you like. And as she describes it, it supports a whole ecosystem of hotels, not luxury hotels, obviously, of hotels and transporters, hotels and transporters, and all the infrastructure, if you like, that goes around this trade where people are coming in.
This has become like the modern character of Johannesburg, Hillary, in terms of the old administrative and office buildings that used to stand there as the proud infrastructure of a bustling Johannesburg, one that was led by the gold rush, but in modern day has been hollowed out. And a lot of traders of different products, whether it's clothing, whether it's shoes, apparel, or the little trinkets that you can get and go sell somewhere else. It's almost like a big wholesaler that has, sprung up at that part of the city and is serving the rest of the continent in terms of supplying products.
And they're wholesalers and retailers. It's all kind of jumbled up together. And the point that she's making she's an urban planner, as a matter of policy, is that this is actually something that instead of harassing and trying to drive these traders out and making their lives very difficult, the city should be supporting, because it actually brings economic benefit to the city. I mean, some of these people are not small traders. The sort of top end of the tree in the area, in the Jeppe area, in what it's called the chaos precinct by the city officials and the police, as you can imagine. There's some pretty prosperous people who are, the landlords, the wholesalers and so on, and that is contributing to the economy of Joburg. But overall, the whole precinct is contributing to the economy of Joburg, and she is arguing that instead of trying to drive these people out and encourage this kind of trading, this is the kind of thing that the city should actually be supporting by providing not conventional infrastructure, but
formalizing the process.
Cleaning. No, not formalizing the process, just supporting it in the kind of things that informal traders need: cleaning, security, lights at work, running water, and so on. Instead of which, people get harassed and live in fear of sort of raids, not just by police, but also by the agents of the big brands.
I think we're having a bit of trouble with your line there, Hillary, but getting the gist of that exciting book, The Chaos Precinct, Johannesburg as a Port City by Tanya Zak. Business Book Review tonight, delivered by Hilary Joffe, the columnist and editor-at-large at the Business Day. Thank you so much for your time.
The Aubrey Masango Show on 702. Streaming on the Prime Media Plus app.
Let's walk the talk.
In about 30 minutes, the award-winning Aubrey Masango Show goes live at 8 p.m. And the man himself is here to give us what's on the menu tonight. Aubrey, what are you looking at?
Mateo, how you doing, brother? You good?
I'm good. I'm well. Great to see you.
Excellent, man. So September marks Prostate Cancer Awareness Month, right?
Very important.
Very, very important. And we're going to be talking about all of the cancers that men are susceptible to. So we're going to be looking at prostate cancer, testicular cancer, and penile cancer. And Dr. Ahmed is a urologist joining us to talk about this in the first hour. In the second hour, media personality and host of the Dan Corder Show joins us in the second hour. Dan Corder, the man with the Skotaikis.
Funny chap.
Absolutely. He joins us just to have a conversation about the politics of the country at the moment, particularly as it pertains to the Madlanga Commission and the Ad Hoc Commission investigating similar things. And then the third hour of the show, you remember that the Banking Association of South Africa has expressed alarm over Minister Parkstow's decision to withdraw draft amendments to the National Credit Act, citing it sets a dangerous precedent. But there are people who agreed with Minister Parkstow, and Matthew Parks, COSATU parliamentary coordinator, will be joining me to give us their perspective on the issue. But then I'll be joined by Annalene van der Poel, who's COO of Debt Rescue, who will basically be representing, I suppose, the Banking Association's opinion in this matter. And then, of course, the final hour, we open up the lines and we chat. That's the Aubrey Masango Show.
Great show ahead. And about 30 minutes, you can get all those topics, very important ones, in discussions later tonight with Aubrey Masango. Time now is 7:30. Your headlines with Dominic Majola.
Thanks, Mateo, and good evening. The ANC has apologized to the people of the Northwest and the Free State, saying they deserve better governance from the organization. Some of the country's worst-performing municipalities are based in these two provinces, where the ANC also enjoys overwhelming support. Today, thousands of ANC councillors from across the country have congregated at the FNB Stadium in Soweto to receive the local government plan of action from the party's national leaders. Thabiso Koba is there.
The Free State is home to the worst-run municipality in the country, Maluti Apofung, while in the Northwest last week, government announced 10 municipalities are either under administration or facing serious financial troubles. In both provinces, all municipalities are governed by the ANC, either outright or through coalitions. Deputy Chairperson of the ANC's Local Government Intervention Committee, Dixon Masemola, says the party has not fully repaid the faith put into it by the people in those provinces.
The people of Free State deserve better. The people of Northwest deserve better from the ANC, in as much as those municipalities remain very important instruments that we cannot, as the ANC, allow them to collapse.
The Kokta Deputy Minister also relayed his party's contrition.
I think we should be able to apologize to South Africans where things have not gone quite okay. It's not what they deserve from the leadership of the ANC at the municipal level.
Masemola says today's meeting shows the party is committed to improving. Thabiso Koba, Eyewitness News, Soweto.
The Umkhonto weSizwe party has once again publicly denounced the formation of the legality of the Madlanga Judicial Commission of Inquiry. The party wants the commission's formation declared unlawful, a request the Constitutional Court dismissed in July. This time, the MK party claims the public hearings commencing on Wednesday, an underhanded move to undermine the court's challenge brought by former President Jacob Zuma, expected to be heard by a full bench in the Pretoria High Court on Thursday. MK spokesperson Tlamulo Ndlela.
This rushed and irregular midweek commencement is no innocent scheduling coincidence. That's a fact. It is a very well calculated move designed to preempt, undermine, and possibly frustrate the court challenge brought by MK party and President Zuma in his personal capacity as well.
Experts have raised concerns about the political struggles of power, which they say have created factional rifts with the structures of the criminal justice system amid claims of maladministration across the board. This as the Commission of Inquiry into alleged criminality, political interference and corruption in the criminal justice system prepares to begin its work this week. But questions of political allegiance fueling factionalism continues to drive conversations in the aftermath of the KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi's explosive allegations in July. Warren Singh reports.
Crime expert Chad Thomas says factionalism within SAPS dates back 25 years to the very first political appointment of Jackie Salebi as National Police Commissioner, who had no previous policing experience.
Since then, we've seen political interference, which of course has created factionalism. The factionalism has created a fractured leadership, and that fractured leadership has now left us with a deficit in leadership.
Political analyst Kenneth Mogatle believes evidence presented at the Madlanga Commission will hurt the former governing party, the ANC.
These divisions is a true reflection of multiple factions which are existing in the ANC today.
KZN Police Commissioner Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi will testify as the first witness at the Madlanga Commission on Wednesday. Arun Singh, Eyewitness News.
A fine Tuesday in store for Gauteng tomorrow. Temperatures will drop to overnight lows of between 9 and 14 and peak at highs of between 28 and 33 degrees. Partly cloudy skies for Cape Town with light rain and moderate southwesterly winds at a low of 13 degrees and a high of 15 degrees. The top story in Eyewitness News: the ANC has apologized to the people of the Northwest and the Free State, saying they deserve better governance from the organization.
Mom, Dad, you're not gonna believe this.
What's up, bud?
Luke's family has a kitchen.
Okay.
Like a real one, with knives and a sink for dishes. His mom was just standing there, making food with her hands. There was a fridge full of vegetables, even broccoli.
Not broccoli.
Oh, the horror. Who needs a kitchen? Simply spend 200 Rand or more and you could win Simply Asia for a year. T's and C's apply. Simply Asia, connecting the Thai way.
This master doesn't just start. It wakes up. Anticipation. The wheel settles into your hands. Seat and mirrors adjust. You didn't ask. It just knew. Then the 3.3-liter turbo diesel clears its throat. And suddenly, you're flying, weaving through sunlight. Goosebumps on your commute. The feeling will find you in the Mazda CX-60. Wonder awaits.
Remember when everyone thought NFTs were the future of modern art? When non-fungible was a buzzword used in boardrooms to justify buying pixels, and the metaverse was just months away, and that we'll all be living in our virtual mansions, admiring our digital paintings, only to realize they were just expensive JPEGs. When you can't trust a trend, trust a 30-year track record of outperforming benchmarks.
Coronation. Trust is earned. Coronation is an authorized FSP.
The Money Show. How I make my money.
Welcome back to the last few minutes of the Money Show, about 23 of them left. We are going to be getting into how I make my money, a very popular feature here on the Money Show. Mandla Sbego, the owner of F&B Art Joburg, joins us for this conversation. Mandla Sbego is the owner and director of F&B Art Joburg, Africa's oldest and longest running art fair. He acquired the fair in 2019, making it 100% black owned. Sbego is a businessman and entrepreneur, also founded Seed Capital Investments, and is also involved in transforming the art space through initiatives like the F&B Art Joburg. Joins us here tonight on The Money Show, talking how I make my money. Mandla, welcome to The Money Show.
Thank you very much for having me. Good evening to you, sir.
Thank you for joining us. Tell me your first artwork as a young man that you looked at and you thought, wow, that is something that is priceless.
Well, I can't quite recollect when was my first artwork, but what I do remember is in those days, I think I was early in business. I think it was just before 2010. I had been in charge of the look and feel for FIFA, for the FIFA stadiums. It was a long process that I had started like 5 years before. And then when I finally had some money after the World Cup, I then wanted to spend it, and one of the things I wanted to do was buy art. So I kind of walked into the FNB Art Joburg Fair. It was called the FNB Art Joburg Fair at the time, and then and I was just so completely dazzled by what I saw, that it was such a very fresh, very contemporary, very edgy. It was the kind of stuff that I saw overseas, but had not seen it here at home. So, and that kind of led me to spending more time with artists and getting to understand what art was about, the little that I could know at the time. And then I bought a couple of pieces. It was mostly prints. Yeah, and that really did make me very interested to a point where I actually wanted to actively invest in the art ecosystem.
We'll get to the acquisition a bit later, but I want to talk about your formative years as somebody that got into business. Why the interest in capital investments? Why the interest in that part of the sector in terms of doing business?
Well, I think I kind of recognize the importance of the creative sector, and my philosophy has always been to invest in my passions. So I've landed up investing in things that I'm passionate about, and then art is one of those. And then I also liked that it wasn't kind of like your traditional museum, nonprofit kind of approach. That it was a commercial business, that it was actually a business that sells space to galleries, engages with galleries, and brings content to the space. And yeah, a lot of people don't quite realize that it is a going business. You do employ people, you do put up this infrastructure, and you do own an infrastructure that you keep that helps you to build quite a big fair once a year.
From outside looking in, and from somebody who's attended some of these art fairs, you can't quite tell where the commercial structure is. It just looks like a lot of artists have come together, put together a lot of their great works, and they've been given a space where they can showcase their work and potentially also get somebody to invest and take it home. But in terms of the commercial viability of this particular investment for you, how does it work? Putting together an art fair and making sure it is profitable.
Yep. Well, it's a year-long process. First and foremost, you need a team of qualified and experienced people who understand the art ecosystem, who speak the language, but also who respect the art ecosystem. So those people you keep the whole year. It varies from a curatorial team to production teams, production management team to marketing teams. And so in essence, in the value chain, you are supporting various people to kind of help you build the fair, including the worker who ultimately comes to the fair to build the wall itself, and to paint, and to put up the vinyls. That's another whole process on its own. That's quite an important thing in an art fair. The architectural side, engaging with an architect, with a lot of backwards and forth. And then the actual creation of the content itself, which requires you to look for understanding where art content sits at this moment, especially in South Africa and across the continent, because we're a Pan-African fair. So it means that we have to be engaged sometimes without even being in those cities, and trying to navigate what does Lagos really look like at this point in time. What are the coolest things that we could bring to Joburg? What are the coolest things that are happening in Ethiopia? Many years ago, we helped to launch the first gallery from Addis Ababa in South Africa that has gone international, is now London-based. That gallery is very focused on the European scene, but doesn't come to Joburg. So we now have to look for the next one. So there are various areas, and then there's the side where you ultimately have built your content, and now you're selling space, the square meterage. There's a formula around the fair. There's different sizes. We speak about the hub. The hub is the main section of the fair where these are galleries that are probably players for more than 20 years. A lot of people go to galleries without seeing that these galleries themselves are actually small businesses. Some of them have become international, like at the top, the top ones are multi-million businesses, actually. If you look at the ones that have South African galleries, for that matter, have spaces in London and so on. So there's a lot of various pieces that ultimately come together, and then there's a ticketing side, and then that's where the audiences come in, and by then everything is done. The fair has been built within a schedule that is set aside with perhaps the convention center, where you buy the space from them for a couple of millions, and then you then have to pay them, and then you have to find money to make sure that you do pay your bills.
I like how you say a couple of millions. How do you then value the square meterage of a gallery? Is that you curating some of the big names in art, or is it based on foot traffic like it would be at a mall? How does that work?
Well, we place experience. Like, we were an 18-year kind of fair. Internationally, the model is that people pay square meterage. It could be like 5 rand per square meter, depending on the size that you have chosen and that we feel fits you. So you'll never get a gallery that's been around for more than 60 years in the smallest space. So they have to take the bigger space. So then that means that they pay more. And then we've created a new section in the fair, which when we reimagined the fair 5 years ago, we called it Gallery Lab, which is really where we incubate the next future galleries from the continent, because we realize that Joburg and South Africa is quite privileged to have a lot of infrastructure inherited from apartheid in many ways, but the rest of the continent doesn't have what Joburg has. So if you're waiting for that African art ecosystem to build itself, you'll wait a lifetime. So we then thought, let's kind of find a way in which we can shift the sponsorship component, which is the other pillar of the business. Is sponsorship, is that FNB then pays for naming rights. And these naming rights, we then decided that we will use their fund, the finance from FNB, mostly to cover for the build-up of the fair, but also to support future young gallerists. That's why this year we could have like 14 galleries from 14 countries, which is quite a lot.
From an events perspective, and I'm trying to come up with a way of explaining it to our listener. From an event perspective, at a concert, you'll have the big names that are coming through, whether it's Amapiano artists or whoever is popular at the time. So your El Anatuis, your Willem Kentridges, Julie Menretu. Do you list those for private clients that know who you're talking about and what the value might be to attend that fair?
Look, another component of an art fair is what we call the VIP program. And this is where all of those big names sit in. So we run privately a VIP program that is really targeted at people who may have been collecting art for a long time. We know them by name. We know what they like. We work together with the galleries on making sure that group of people has access to our VIP program. And that VIP program gives people into it's smaller gatherings that take place during the fair of inspirational experiences that people would ordinarily not have. But also it could be engagements with artists. And and then what has actually started to happen, Moteo, is that when we went just before the fair, the galleries run on a catalog system. So the catalogs get released. And on those catalogs, that's when you'll pick up which artists are actually going to appear at the fair. It's very important that catalogs go out before the fair, because the buyers who buy art at the fair are not only at the fair, they're also outside of the fair. They could be anywhere in the world who are particularly looking for a particular piece.
So those calls, are they coming through red telephones and people are telling you, this is what I'd like?
Yes, they come through to the galleries themselves directly to saying, I'm ready for this. This is what I want. And thank you so much. Can I see it? Can I send someone to see it? Can I get an advisor to come and have a look at it if it's someone who's maybe here in South Africa and they cannot be there themselves? But collecting art is a passion for most. So you tend to find your chairmans and your CEOs and or just individuals
Yeah.
who are interested coming in themselves, to look at this work. The physicality part is still critical.
How important is it though to still have access to the likes of me who just like to look at art, because you do know you don't have the deep pockets yet to get great collectibles from those major artists and big names.
Well, the reimagining of the fair with FNB 5 years ago shifted the focus to people like you now, to saying we need to find ways of growing the next cohort of South Africans who will carry this legacy forward. Because the guys who started these type of things 18 years ago had now retired. If you look at chairmen and CEOs of First Rand, a lot of them retired, as an example, and across different sectors. So it was quite important that we start to look to the future. But at the same time, we bring people who ordinarily would not be interested or didn't know how to engage with art. And lastly, it was so important that as transformation peaks in South Africa, we hope, across the private sector, that you can ultimately have the next cohort of leadership who are not blinded by what's on their walls in those offices or in government roles, because we wanted to find ways of protecting culture and of protecting the future of the art ecosystem. So very much the work that we do when you walk into the fair, there's one side that's completely about education only, which is a talks program, the guided walkabouts, so it's a very warm, vibrant, exciting space that makes you feel proud to be South African.
All right, we're in conversation with Mandla Sbego, founder of FNB Art Joburg, in our feature, How I Make My Money. Let's give you more after this.
One degree defines you as a master of business, the MBA. The life-changing Gibbs MBA empowers you to lead an organization or start your own business within the dynamic African context. Choose from 90 electives and 8 focus areas: general management, entrepreneurship, consulting, manufacturing, digital, humane leadership, healthcare, and climate leadership. For our next information session, go to gibbs.co.za/MBA. Gibbs is a Triple Crown internationally accredited business school in Ilovo, Sandton.
Corporates That Care promotes and encourages corporate leaders and all citizens to walk the talk for a better South Africa. Catch Corporates That Care this Wednesday at 10 to 9 featuring Tracker. Their CEO, Dylan Fernando, will be in conversation with Bongani Bingwa, joining us every Wednesday as we highlight the efforts of companies and brands dedicated to building our country. Corporates That Care is a Prime Media Cares initiative with 702 and Prime Media Outdoor. 702, let's walk the talk and make a difference together.
Spar brings you super savings. Get 1 kg D-Lite 37% fat spread tub, $34.99. Save 8 Rand with Spar Rewards. Or 1 kg Spar French, chili, garlic or chicken polony for $34.99 with Spar Rewards. Plus, you could win your share of 6 million Rand in instant cash. Price is valid until 22 September 2025. While stocks last. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
The Money Show, How I Make My Money.
And we're deep in the pockets of Mandla Sbego, the founder of FNB Art Joburg, telling us about the ins and outs and commercial viability of the Joburg Art Fair and art itself as an industry. Mandla, I just want to get into the acquisition. What attracted you to the FNB Art Joburg, and was this a chance opportunity? You were at the right gallery at the right time and you had a great conversation with somebody who was willing to sell. How did the acquisition happen?
Look, I didn't quite plan it at all, actually, to be involved. It was actually a chance. The former owner of Paul Smith stores here in South Africa at the time took me to the art fair. And I enjoyed it so much that I was like, how do I get involved? So it initially started with me investing 10%, at which we came to some sort of a value around how much my investment would be. And then really getting my hands dirty. I worked hand in hand with the co-founder, the person who actually started the first edition. It really gave me it was such a big window. It opened up, I started to realize the more and more the importance of what an art fair does. I hadn't really paid attention to it in that way. But at the same time, I kind of understood how everything comes together. Like you mentioned much earlier, that when you walk in, it just looks like a space where you might actually be thinking you're helping an artist or not. But we forget that artists have to put bread and butter at home, and artists have to send their kids to school. They themselves are a running business, and then we also underestimate the role of the galleries in an art ecosystem like ours. Unfortunately, in South Africa, we don't have strong institutions. When you go to Europe or New York, there's more than 20 museums, and and they're well funded.
A lot of backing for art, even financially.
Lots of backing. We do not have as much backing. I think private capital is not as engaged as I would like it to be. We're a country that is far much more focused on sports. It's just, I can't help it. It is what it is. There's more money going to rugby than there is to culture. So I started to kind of wear both hats, one being a champion on the one hand, and then the other is obviously looking at it as a commercial business. And I got to understand it, and some of the things I looked at was it profitable ever, and what happened in the first year, and the years by, and will I put my money here and never get it back? Will it be? But also understanding the importance of how a fair is set up. The build costs are quite expensive, but at the same time, the role of sponsorship. So on the one hand is you have to have someone who has a relationship to manage stakeholders. These stakeholders are not only just the galleries but also the business side. So you on a typical day-to-day, we're managing just the balance between what is very commercial, the commercial interest of a bank, and their interest in being invested in art. And on the one hand, you're managing artists who are coming through the fair who might not necessarily care about the commercial interest of a bank and its importance of why they do what they do, as well as maybe a gallery system that might not also appreciate, or maybe does, but has its own agenda. So it's actually quite a complex role to play when you're directing an art fair, because you have to manage this multitude of stakeholders and their expectations. Then you have what you call the collectors. And South Africa has quite a small base of collectors.
You have to have those client relations with them as well.
That's it.
There's quite
a lot that happens.
Would you say that the F&B Art Joburg has been one of the best art pieces that you've bought in your collection?
Well, the fair itself, definitely by far. It's also given me an insight into really first view of what is the best art. So on the one hand, I carry my passion, which is really directly art, that I can buy art and I want to buy art, and I will do it until the last day on earth. That's my commitment to it. And sometimes it gets to a point where it's not about the value of the art. You can look at a car, and then you can look at art. And then with an art piece, there are people I know whose collections are sometimes much more worth, are far much more of higher value than even their own homes, as an example.
Yeah.
And you just, And you're like, wow, this is amazing. And then there are people who just don't stop buying because it's a commitment to the art ecosystem. They've now built relationships with artists and they have a sense of purpose.
Mandla, I have a
ultimately.
few seconds left. Sorry to cut you short there,
Okay.
but just one quick
No
fire
problem.
question. Your favorite artist?
Yeah. You know what? It's a very difficult one, but I have to say he's an icon. He's a legend. Outside of South Africa, I always say there's two. Obviously, William Kentridge. There's no one who's put Johannesburg on the map like he has from an art ecosystem.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, Alan Natsui, who's Ghanaian and lives between Ghana and Nigeria. Phenomenal artist who
And
have
have you had the
really,
opportunity to own any of their pieces?
No, can't afford it.
Not yet. Well, Mandla Sbego, the founder of FNB Art Joburg, talking to us on how he makes his money.
The Money Show with Stephen Grootes is brought to you by ABSA CIB, proud host of the Macro and Risk Management Conference 2025. ABSA is an authorized FSP and registered credit provider. T's and C's apply.
Well, that was the Money Show tonight. Thank you for joining us. Let's talk money tomorrow.
This is EWN.
Good evening, I'm Dominique Machola. The city of Johannesburg is scrambling to resolve the long-standing water crisis that has been frustrated. Residents and businesses face dry taps for weeks on end. The situation came to a head this past week. As part of the city again hit by widespread violent clashes between residents and law enforcement. Officials have blamed the supply failures on the combination of aging infrastructure, excessive water consumption and backlog in maintenance. For years, experts and civil society groups have warned that the city's water system was on the brink of a collapse. Thandoluhle Ngcobo reports.
Part of the city's challenge is the massive loss of water through leaks, pipe bursts, and illegal connections. While the global average for such losses is between 15 and 25%, the city has at times lost as much as 44% of its water before it reaches consumers. The crisis has been made worse by a series of events, including power outages, maintenance backlog,